The sun peeked over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow across the sleepy neighborhood. Birds chirped cheerfully as Mrs. Evelyn Thompson stepped out of her small but cozy home, clutching her leather purse tightly in one hand. Inside the purse was her monthly pension check, a lifeline that helped her keep food on the table and medicine stocked. At 72 years old, Evelyn had lived in this community her entire life. She knew almost everyone by name: the grocer who always gave her an extra apple, the postman who stopped to chat about his grandchildren, and the kids down the street whose laughter brightened even the gloomiest days. Today, Evelyn dressed in her Sunday best, a floral print dress paired with pearl earrings she'd owned for decades. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and though arthritis made walking difficult, she carried herself with quiet dignity. The bank wasn't far from her house, just a 10-minute walk away, but it felt longer today because of the heat. Still, Evelyn didn't mind. She liked these morning walks. They gave her time to think about simpler times, like when she used to bake pies for church fundraisers or read bedtime stories to her now-grown children. As she approached the bank, Evelyn noticed how busy it already was. People milled around inside, some waiting in line while others filled out forms at desks. A young mother juggled a toddler and a diaper bag near the entrance, and a man in a suit tapped impatiently on his phone. It was your typical weekday scene. Nothing unusual. Evelyn took a deep breath before stepping through the glass doors, the cool air conditioning hitting her face instantly. She joined the queue, standing behind a tall man wearing sunglasses. While she waited, she glanced around the room. The walls were painted a bland beige and motivational posters hung here and there, reminding customers to save smart or invest in your future. None of it particularly inspired Evelyn, but she appreciated the effort. Her eyes drifted to the teller counters where employees typed furiously on keyboards or counted stacks of bills. Everything seemed normal until it was her turn. Evelyn stepped up to the counter, greeted by a young woman with a name tag that read Tiffany. Smiling warmly, Evelyn handed over her check. Tiffany barely looked up as she scanned the document and began typing on her computer. Seconds ticked by, then minutes. Evelyn shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of stares from people in line behind her. Finally, Tiffany frowned and said, "There's a problem with your account." Evelyn blinked, confused. "A problem? What kind of problem?" "I'm not sure," Tiffany replied curtly, avoiding eye contact. "I'll need to verify some things first." Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She explained that she came every month to cash her pension check without any issues, but Tiffany only shrugged, saying she couldn't help until the system cleared whatever flag had been raised. As Evelyn tried to make sense of the situation, frustration bubbled within her. This wasn't right. She needed that money to survive. When she raised her voice slightly, asking for answers, the manager appeared from behind a closed door, looking annoyed. "Ma'am, please lower your tone," the manager said sternly. "You're causing a disturbance." Evelyn froze, her cheeks burning with shame. Was she really being accused of making trouble? All she wanted was to cash her check, something she'd done countless times before. Now, surrounded by strangers watching her every move, she felt smaller than ever. Her heart pounded as tears threatened to spill, and for a moment, all she wanted to do was run away. Little did she know someone unexpected was about to change everything. The room seemed to grow quieter as Evelyn stood at the counter, her hands trembling slightly around the edges of her purse. The manager's sharp tone echoed in her ears, and she felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. She wasn't usually one to cause a scene. She prided herself on being polite, patient, and respectful. But this was different. This wasn't just about cashing a check. It was about being treated fairly, like any other customer who walked through those bank doors. "I'm not causing a disturbance," Evelyn said softly, trying to keep her voice steady despite the lump forming in her throat. "I just want to understand why I can't cash my check today. I've been coming here for years without any problems." Her words hung in the air, unanswered. Instead, the manager exchanged a glance with Tiffany, the teller, their expressions unreadable but somehow dismissive. The manager sighed loudly as if dealing with Evelyn was an inconvenience. "Ma'am, we have protocols to follow. If there's an issue with your account, it's our duty to investigate further. We can't simply ignore potential red flags. Red flags? Evelyn repeated, her voice rising involuntarily. What? Red flags? I didn't do anything wrong. She could feel eyes boring into her back, other customers watching silently, some shaking their heads, others scrolling on their phones as if nothing unusual was happening. It made her feel even smaller, like she was under a microscope while everyone else got to look away. Tiffany chimed in then, her tone clipped. It might be best if you step aside so we can assist the next customer. Once we figure out what's going on, we'll let you know. Evelyn stared at her, stunned. Step aside, after waiting in line, explaining her situation, and enduring accusations that implied she was somehow dishonest? She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. She blinked rapidly, determined not to cry, not here, not in front of all these strangers, but the humiliation was overwhelming. Just as she began to gather her things, preparing to leave before she completely broke down, a new voice cut through the tension. Deep, commanding, and full of authority, it demanded attention. Excuse me, what's going on here? Everyone turned toward the source of the interruption, a tall man standing near the entrance, his presence undeniable. He wore a simple hoodie and jeans, but there was something unmistakable about him. His broad shoulders filled the space, and his piercing gaze locked onto the manager and Tiffany behind the counter. For a moment, no one spoke. Then whispers rippled through the crowd. Isn't that Vin Diesel? Evelyn froze, unsure whether to believe her ears or her eyes. Sure enough, the man striding toward them bore the unmistakable features of the Hollywood star. Yet instead of acting aloof or uninterested, he looked genuinely concerned, his brow furrowed as he approached Evelyn. Ma'am, are you okay? He asked gently, his deep voice softening now that he was addressing her directly. Evelyn hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. I don't know, she stammered, finally clutching her purse tighter. They won't cash my check, and they're saying there's a problem with my account, but I don't understand why. Vin nodded slowly, his jaw tightening as he processed her words. Turning back to the manager, he crossed his arms over his chest. Can someone explain what's happening here? He asked, his tone firm yet calm. The manager shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for this level of scrutiny, especially from someone famous. Well, sir, we're following standard procedure, the manager began, stumbling over her words. There appears to be an irregularity with the account, and we need to resolve it before proceeding. Vin raised an eyebrow. An irregularity? And how exactly does that justify treating this woman like she's done something wrong? Did she raise her voice once? Did she threaten anyone, or did she simply ask for help? The questions hung heavy in the air, leaving the manager speechless. Other customers started murmuring among themselves, some nodding in agreement, others pulling out their phones to capture the moment. The atmosphere in the bank shifted dramatically, from indifference to discomfort to outright support for Evelyn. One older gentleman stepped forward, addressing the manager. He's right. This lady deserves better than this. Evelyn couldn't believe what was happening. Just moments ago, she had felt utterly alone, humiliated, and defeated. Now, thanks to the unexpected arrival of a stranger, a celebrity no less, she found herself surrounded by people willing to stand up for her. As Vin continued to press the manager for answers, Evelyn wiped away her tears, feeling a flicker of hope reignite within her. Whatever happened next, she realized, wouldn't be just about her anymore. It was about fairness, respect, and standing up against. Vin Diesel didn't wait for the manager to gather her thoughts. He leaned slightly forward, his imposing frame making the small space behind the counter feel even more cramped. His voice was calm, but carried a weight that demanded attention. Let me get this straight, he said, his eyes narrowing as he looked between the manager and Tiffany. This woman, this elderly woman who's clearly just trying to cash her check, has done nothing wrong. Yet you're accusing her of causing trouble and refusing to help her? Is that really how you treat your customers? The manager fumbled, with her clipboard avoiding eye contact. "Sir, we're just following protocol. There's a flag on her account, and until we resolve it, we can't process the transaction." "A flag?" Vin repeated, his tone incredulous. "What kind of flag? Did she rob a bank last week? Did she try to scam someone?" "No. She handed over her check, and instead of helping her, you've made her feel like a criminal." He turned to Evelyn then, his expression softening. "Ma'am, I'm sorry you're going through this. Please tell me exactly what happened." Evelyn hesitated, still overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. But something about Vin's presence gave her courage. Taking a shaky breath, she recounted everything, from handing over her check to the dismissive attitude of the teller, and finally, the manager's accusation that she was being disruptive. As she spoke, Vin listened intently, nodding occasionally, and offering reassuring smiles. When Evelyn finished, Vin turned back to the manager, his patience wearing thin. "So let me ask again, why is there a problem? And why are you treating her like she's guilty before proving otherwise?" The manager stammered, glancing nervously at Tiffany for backup. Neither of them seemed prepared to handle the situation, not with Vin standing there radiating authority and unwavering support for Evelyn. By now, the entire bank had gone silent. Customers who had previously ignored Evelyn's plight were now fully engaged, some muttering under their breath about unfair treatment, while others openly expressed their outrage. A young woman near the front of the line called out, "This isn't right. She shouldn't be treated like this." Another man added, "Yeah, if there's an issue, fix it quickly instead of embarrassing her." The growing chorus of voices only added pressure on the manager, whose face flushed red under the scrutiny. Finally, she relented, turning to one of her colleagues and instructing them to investigate further. "We'll look into it immediately," she promised, though her tone lacked sincerity. Vin wasn't satisfied. "No," he said firmly, crossing his arms. "You're going to do more than look into it. You're going to fix this now. Right here, right in front of everyone. Because if you don't, people will see exactly how this bank treats its customers, especially those who deserve respect." His words resonated deeply with the crowd. Some clapped softly, while others nodded in agreement. Even the security guard stationed near the door shifted uncomfortably, clearly uneasy with how poorly Evelyn had been treated. For the first time since entering the bank, Evelyn felt a sense of solidarity. Strangers she'd never met were rallying around her, united by a shared belief in fairness and kindness. As the staff scrambled to resolve the issue, Vin stayed close to Evelyn, offering quiet words of encouragement. "You didn't deserve any of this," he told her gently. "No one should ever make you feel less than you are. You're strong and you're important. Don't forget that." Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of gratitude. She managed a weak smile, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Vin shook his head, dismissing her thanks with a warm chuckle. "Don't thank me yet. We're not leaving until this is resolved, and until they apologize for the way they treated you." Then, lowering his voice so only she could hear, he added, "And maybe after today things will start to change, for you and for others like you." For Evelyn, those words carried a promise of hope. What had begun as a humiliating ordeal was slowly transforming into something else entirely. A moment of empowerment, not just for her, but for everyone watching. As the bank employees worked frantically to clear the so-called flag on her account, Evelyn stood tall, buoyed by the unexpected ally beside her. Little did she know this was only the beginning of a story that would ripple far beyond the walls of the bank. The bank employees scrambled to resolve the issue, their movements hurried and clumsy under Vin Diesel's watchful gaze. The manager whispered urgently into a phone, likely calling someone higher up in the corporate chain, while Tiffany typed furiously on her keyboard, her face flushed with embarrassment. Other staff members darted back and forth, consulting screens and flipping through papers as if searching for answers to a mystery that didn't exist. To Evelyn, it all felt surreal. Just moments ago, she had been on the verge of leaving the bank in tears, humiliated and defeated. Now, thanks to Vin's intervention, the tables had turned. Vin stood beside Evelyn like an unshakable pillar of strength, his presence commanding respect, even from those who hadn't dared to speak up before. He glanced at the crowd occasionally, noting how the atmosphere had shifted entirely. People were no longer indifferent. They were invested. A few customers recorded snippets of the scene on their phones, while others exchanged knowing looks, shaking their heads at the absurdity of what had unfolded. One older man near the front muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "This is why people don't trust banks anymore." Evelyn couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride amidst her lingering unease. She wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Strangers, people she'd never met, were standing with her, united by a shared sense of justice. And then there was Vin, whose kindness seemed almost too good to be true. Here was a global superstar, someone who could have easily walked past without a second glance, yet he had chosen to step in and make things right. It wasn't just about cashing a check anymore. It was about dignity, fairness, and proving that no one should ever be treated poorly because of their age, race, or background. After several tense minutes, the manager finally approached the counter, again clutching a folder filled with papers. Her tone was noticeably softer now, almost apologetic. "Mrs. Thompson," she began, her voice wavering slightly, "we've reviewed your account, and it appears there was a clerical error. There's no issue with your check. It's perfectly valid, and we can process it immediately." Evelyn stared at her, unsure whether to believe what she was hearing. "A clerical error?" she repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You mean none of this was my fault?" "That's correct," the manager replied quickly, avoiding eye contact. "We're very sorry for the confusion and any distress it may have caused." Vin raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by the vague apology. "Distress?" he echoed, his deep voice cutting through the room once again. "Ma'am, this woman was humiliated in front of everyone here. She was accused of causing trouble when all she wanted to do was cash her check. That's not distress. That's unacceptable. What are you going to do to ensure this doesn't happen again?" The question hung heavy in the air, leaving the manager visibly flustered. "Well, we'll certainly review our procedures and provide additional training to our staff," she stammered. "And of course, we'll apologize personally to Mrs. Thompson." Vin nodded slowly, though his expression remained stern. "Good. Because actions matter more than words. An apology means nothing unless you follow through with real change." Turning to Evelyn, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you ready to move forward, ma'am? Or do you want them to keep digging themselves deeper?" Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling a surge of confidence she hadn't felt in years. For so long, she'd accepted mistreatment as part of life, brushing off rude comments or dismissive behavior, because she thought speaking up wouldn't make a difference. But today was different. Today she realized that standing up for herself and having someone stand with her could spark meaningful change. "I'm ready," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. As the transaction was finally processed, Vin stayed by Evelyn's side, ensuring everything went smoothly. When the teller handed over the cash, Evelyn accepted it with quiet gratitude, her fingers brushing against the crisp bills. It wasn't just money. It represented vindication, respect, and the power of standing up against injustice. Before leaving, Vin turned to address the crowd one last time. "Thank you all for supporting Mrs. Thompson today," he said sincerely. "Moments like these remind us that we're stronger together. Let's carry the spirit of compassion and accountability into our everyday lives. If we see something wrong, let's speak up. Change starts with each of us." The room erupted into applause, and Evelyn felt tears welling up again, but this time they were tears of joy. As she walked out of the bank with Vin by her side, she knew her life would never be the same. This wasn't just about a check or a single act of kindness. It was about hope, resilience, and the belief that even in the darkest moments humanity could shine through. As Evelyn stepped out of the bank with Vin Diesel by her side, The warm sunlight greeted them like a comforting embrace. The contrast between the cold, tense atmosphere inside the bank and the bright open air outside was striking. For Evelyn, it felt like stepping into a new chapter of her life, one where she was no longer invisible or dismissed but seen and valued. She clutched her purse tightly, the weight of the cash inside a tangible reminder of what had just transpired. But more than that, she carried something far greater, a renewed sense of dignity. Vin didn't rush off immediately, despite surely having other places to be. Instead, he walked slowly beside Evelyn, matching her pace as they moved away from the building. "You handled yourself beautifully in there," he said, his deep voice full of sincerity. "Not everyone would have stayed calm after being treated the way you were." Evelyn shook her head, still processing everything. "I don't think I could have done it without you," she admitted softly. "If you hadn't stepped in, I might have left crying, thinking it was all my fault." "It wasn't your fault," Vin replied firmly, his tone unwavering. "What happened in there wasn't about you, it was about bias, carelessness, and systems that forget how to treat people with respect. You deserved better, plain and simple." His words struck a chord deep within Evelyn. Growing up in a world where she had often been overlooked because of her race and gender, she had learned to endure hardship silently. She'd told herself that speaking up wouldn't change anything, that fighting back would only make things worse. But today proved her wrong. Today showed her that standing up, even with help, could lead to real change. Sensing her reflective mood, Vin continued, sharing a story from his own past. "When I was younger," he began, "I faced my share of struggles too. People judged me based on how I looked, where I came from, or what they thought I represented. There were days when I felt like giving up, like maybe they were right about me. But then I realized something important. If we let others define us, we lose sight of who we truly are. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to remind us of our worth." Evelyn listened intently, touched by his vulnerability. Here was a man who had achieved incredible success, yet he spoke with such humility and empathy. It made her feel less alone, as though her pain and resilience mattered, not just to him but to the world. Before parting ways, Vin reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. On it was written a phone number and email address. "This is for you," he said, handing it to her. "If you ever need anything or if anyone tries to treat you unfairly again, you call me. No excuses. Promise?" Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes once more, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the card tightly. "You've given me so much more than just your help today. You've reminded me that kindness still exists in this world." Vin smiled warmly, his trademark charm shining through. "Kindness starts with us, Mrs. Thompson. We can't control how others act, but we can choose to respond with compassion and courage. That's how we create change, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us." With that, he gave her a gentle hug before walking away, leaving Evelyn standing under the sun, feeling lighter than she had in years. Passers-by glanced curiously at her, some recognizing her from the scene at the bank. A young woman approached hesitantly, holding her toddler's hand. "Are you the lady from the bank?" she asked shyly. Evelyn nodded, smiling despite herself. "Yes, I am." The woman's face lit up with admiration. "You're amazing. What happened in there wasn't fair, but seeing someone like Vin Diesel stand up for you, that gives me hope. Maybe we can all do better, you know?" Her words lingered in Evelyn's mind long after she returned home. Hope. That's exactly what today had given her. Not just hope for herself, but hope for humanity. The incident at the bank had exposed ugly truths about prejudice and indifference, but it had also revealed something beautiful, the power of empathy and collective action. When people came together, refusing to stay silent in the face of injustice, even the smallest moments could spark monumental change. That evening, as Evelyn sat in her favorite armchair with a cup of tea, she replayed the day's events in her mind. She thought about the crowd that had rallied behind her, the strangers who had spoken up and the unexpected ally who had turned her humiliation into triumph. Most importantly, she thought about what Vin had said. Change starts with each of us. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt ready to take that message to heart. The days following the incident at the bank passed quickly for Evelyn, but the memory of that morning lingered vividly in her mind. She found herself replaying Vin Diesel's words over and over again, his reminder that change starts with each of us. It was a simple yet powerful idea, one that stirred something deep within her. For years she had lived quietly, avoiding confrontation and accepting life's injustices as inevitable. But now, inspired by the unexpected support she'd received, Evelyn began to wonder if she could do more. More for herself, more for others, and more for her community. A few days later, Evelyn received an envelope in the mail. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, but when she opened it, her hands trembled with emotion. Inside was a handwritten letter from Vin Diesel himself, along with 2 tickets to the premiere of his upcoming movie. The letter was warm and heartfelt, thanking Evelyn not just for enduring the ordeal at the bank, but for inspiring him as well. "You reminded me of why standing up against injustice matters," he wrote. "Your strength and grace are examples we should all strive to follow." Evelyn read the letter several times, tears streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't believe that someone like Vin, a global icon, had taken the time to write to her personally. More than the kind words, though, it was the gesture that touched her most. He hadn't simply walked away after leaving the bank. He had stayed connected, ensuring she knew how much her courage meant. Holding the tickets in her hand, Evelyn felt a mix of excitement and disbelief. A movie premiere? Her? It almost felt surreal. But Vin didn't stop there. Along with the letter, he included a generous gift card to a local grocery store, enough to cover months' worth of essentials. Evelyn stared at it, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. This wasn't charity, it was compassion, wrapped in dignity. He had given her not only financial relief, but also the reassurance that she mattered. That weekend, Evelyn decided to visit the same grocery store where she shopped every month. As she pushed her cart down the aisles, she noticed people glancing at her curiously. Word of what had happened at the bank had spread throughout the neighborhood, thanks in part to social media posts shared by witnesses. Some customers approached her shyly, offering hugs or words of encouragement. One woman even said, "What those bankers did to you was wrong, but seeing how you handled it and how Vin stepped in gave me hope. Thank you for showing us what bravery looks like." Evelyn blushed at the praise, still unaccustomed to being called brave. Yet she realized that her experience had resonated with others in ways she hadn't anticipated. People saw themselves in her story, the frustration of being dismissed, the pain of feeling invisible, and the triumph of standing tall despite adversity. In turn, they were inspired to reflect on their own lives and actions. Back home, Evelyn carefully placed the movie premiere tickets and Vin's letter in a special drawer, alongside cherished photos of her family. These items weren't just keepsakes, they were symbols of a turning point in her life. That night, as she prepared dinner, she thought about the ripple effect of kindness. Vin's intervention hadn't just helped her, it had sparked conversations across the community. Neighbors who rarely spoke to one another were now discussing issues like racial bias, ageism, and the importance of empathy. Local organizations began planning workshops aimed at fostering understanding and addressing systemic inequalities. Feeling emboldened, Evelyn made a decision. She would attend the movie premiere, not just as a guest but as someone ready to share her story. If her experience could inspire even one person to stand up against injustice, then she owed it to herself and others to speak out. For so long, she had kept her struggles private, believing her voice didn't matter. Now she understood differently. Change might start with individuals, but it grows when stories are told and heard. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Evelyn smiled, softly, imagining what the future might hold. She thought about Vin's unwavering support, the strangers who had rallied behind her, and the newfound sense of purpose bubbling within her. Life had thrown her a curveball that day at the bank, but instead of breaking her spirit, it had ignited something remarkable, a determination to use her voice for good. And though she didn't know exactly where this path would lead, one thing was certain: she was ready to embrace it. The days turned into weeks, and Evelyn's story continued to spread far beyond the walls of the bank. Social media played a big role in amplifying her experience, with videos and posts from witnesses going viral. People were captivated not just by the injustice Evelyn faced, but also by the way Vin Diesel had stepped in to defend her. News outlets picked up the story, turning it into headlines like "Hollywood Hero Stands Up for Elderly Woman" and "A Moment of Humanity at the Bank." What started as a personal ordeal quickly became a national conversation about fairness, respect, and accountability. For Evelyn, the attention was both overwhelming and humbling. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, yet she found comfort in knowing that her story resonated with so many people. Strangers reached out to her through letters, emails, and even social media messages, sharing their own experiences of mistreatment and thanking her for inspiring them to speak up. Some told her they had faced similar situations at banks, stores, or workplaces but had stayed silent out of fear or shame. Others expressed admiration for her courage, saying her actions reminded them that no one should tolerate disrespect. Meanwhile, the backlash against the bank grew louder. Customers began canceling accounts, posting reviews online detailing their dissatisfaction with the institution's handling of Evelyn's case. Local activists organized protests outside the branch, holding signs that read, "Respect our elders," and "Justice for Mrs. Thompson." The pressure forced the bank's corporate office to issue a public apology, acknowledging the harm caused and promising reforms. They announced plans to implement mandatory diversity training for all employees and establish a hotline for customers to report discriminatory behavior. But Evelyn didn't stop there. Encouraged by the support she'd received and inspired by Vin's reminder that change starts with individuals, she decided to use her newfound platform to advocate for others. She accepted invitations to speak at community events, schools, and senior centers, sharing her story and urging listeners to stand up against injustice. Her talks weren't filled with anger or bitterness. Instead, they radiated warmth, wisdom, and hope. She emphasized the importance of treating everyone with dignity, regardless of age, race, or background. One evening, Evelyn attended a town hall meeting focused on addressing systemic biases in local businesses. Sitting at the front of the room, she listened as residents voiced their concerns about unequal treatment in various settings, from healthcare facilities to retail stores. When it was her turn to speak, Evelyn stood slowly, gripping the microphone with steady hands. "I never imagined my life would take this turn," she began, her voice soft but clear. "But I've learned something important. None of us are alone in our struggles. We may feel invisible sometimes, but together, we can shine a light on what needs to change." Her words moved the audience deeply, prompting applause and cheers. Afterward, several attendees approached her to thank her for speaking out. One young woman, barely in her 20s, hugged Evelyn tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Your story gave me strength," she said. "I've been afraid to confront unfairness in my workplace, but hearing you talk makes me realize I have a voice too." Evelyn smiled, patting the young woman's hand. "We all do," she replied gently. "And when we use those voices, we remind the world that kindness and fairness matter." As the weeks went by, Evelyn noticed subtle changes in her community. Neighbors who once kept to themselves now greeted her warmly, often stopping to chat about how her story had impacted them. Local organizations launched initiatives aimed at supporting marginalized groups, including seniors and people of color. Even the bank where the incident occurred seemed different. Employees greeted customers with genuine smiles, and posters promoting inclusivity adorned the walls. Through it all, Evelyn remained humble, never forgetting the moment when Vin Diesel had stepped in to defend her. His act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, proving that even small gestures could lead to profound change. As she prepared for the movie premiere, Evelyn reflected on how much her life had transformed since that fateful day. What had begun as an ordinary trip to the bank had become a catalyst for growth, not just for her but for countless others who saw themselves in her journey. And while Evelyn knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, she felt ready to face whatever challenges came her way. She had discovered her voice, her purpose, and the power of standing up, even when it felt scary. For Evelyn, this was only the beginning. The night of the movie premiere arrived, and Evelyn stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing the fabric of a dress she hadn't worn in years. It was a deep emerald green, its color as vibrant as the hope blooming within her. She paired it with her pearl earrings, the same ones she'd worn on that fateful day at the bank, and took a step back to examine herself. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't see just an elderly woman preparing for another quiet evening. She saw someone renewed, someone ready to embrace the world. When Vin Diesel greeted her at the red carpet entrance, his smile lit up the entire venue. Cameras flashed wildly as reporters clamored for details about their unlikely friendship. "Mrs. Thompson," Vin said warmly, extending his arm to escort her inside. "You look absolutely stunning tonight." Evelyn chuckled softly, feeling both nervous and grateful. "And here I thought I'd be spending my Friday nights watching old movies alone," she quipped, earning laughter from those around her. Inside the theater, Evelyn marveled at the grandeur of it all, the plush seats, the dazzling chandeliers, and the crowd buzzing with excitement. As the lights dimmed and the film began, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she'd come. Just weeks ago, she had been humiliated in a bank, questioning whether anyone would ever truly see her. Now she sat among strangers turned friends, celebrated not for fame or fortune but for resilience and courage. After the screening, during a Q&A session with the cast, Vin invited Evelyn to join him on stage. The audience erupted into applause as she made her way to the microphone, her heart pounding with every step. "I never imagined I'd end up here today," she admitted, her voice steady, despite the sea of faces before her. "But this journey has taught me something important. None of us are powerless. Even when life tries to make us feel small, we can rise above it, with kindness, with courage, and with the support of others." Her words resonated deeply, prompting a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Afterward, countless attendees approached her to express gratitude for sharing her story. One man, visibly emotional, shared how he had recently confronted discrimination at his workplace after being inspired by her example. A teenage girl handed Evelyn a handmade card, thanking her for reminding younger generations to stand up for what's right. Each interaction filled Evelyn with a profound sense of purpose. In the months that followed, Evelyn became a beacon of change in her community. She collaborated with local leaders to organize workshops focused on empathy and inclusion, drawing from her own experiences to educate others. Her advocacy extended beyond speeches and events. She started volunteering at schools, mentoring young students who reminded her of her own grandchildren. "You don't have to wait for the perfect moment to make a difference," she often told them. "Sometimes the smallest actions can create the biggest waves." Meanwhile, the ripple effects of her story continued to spread. The bank where the incident occurred underwent significant changes, implementing stricter policies against discriminatory practices and hosting monthly forums to address customer concerns. Employees reported feeling more empowered to speak up when they witnessed unfair treatment, knowing their voices mattered. Across town, other businesses followed suit, recognizing the importance of fostering environments built on respect and equality. For Evelyn, the most rewarding part wasn't the accolades or recognition. It was seeing people come together to build a better future. She remained close friends with Vin, exchanging letters and occasional phone calls. Though their lives were vastly different, their bond remained strong, rooted in mutual admiration and shared values. In one letter, Vin wrote, "You've shown the world that heroes aren't defined by capes or titles, they're defined by moments of humanity. Keep shining your light, Mrs. Thompson." As Evelyn settled into her favorite armchair one evening, surrounded by mementos of her remarkable journey, She allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Life hadn't always been kind to her, but she had chosen to respond with grace and determination. She thought about the strangers who had rallied behind her, the activists inspired by her courage, and the children learning to believe in their own potential because of her example. Through it all, she realized that the legacy of her story wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone who dared to stand up, speak out, and create change. And so, Evelyn smiled, content in the knowledge that her voice had sparked something greater than herself. What had begun as a humiliating day at the bank had transformed into a testament to the enduring power of compassion, unity, and resilience. For Evelyn Thompson, this wasn't the end. It was a